Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. This is our, second episode of this newer season, and we have a big one, or at least a big one that we have been heavily anticipating. I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Adelaide, but today we have a guest. Addie, if you want to, I'll pass it over to you.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a big nerd, and I spent a lot of my days following podcasts, nailing movie trivia, which was an old show I had in this network, and through them, I got connected to a few things. I found something called the Critically Acclaimed Network. And I found a guest host there who, if you give me 2 seconds, because I accidentally closed out of it like 2 minutes ago. Someone who also runs their own podcast network, was someone who I really very much respect. Heard their opinions, very much respect. Very knowledgeable person. And I saw on Twitter they had said, like, hey, can someone get me on for this? Because I'm really passionate about it. And we were going to be too, so I said, sure. So welcome, B. Peterson from the Screen Margins podcast.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So fancy. Oh my gosh.
I'm just a humble podcast network host. I do podcasts about films from people that you might have never heard of, even though they deserve to be as talked about as much as someone like Hitchcock or Kurosawa. That these people are dope too, and we should watch all of their movies. So that's what I do.
Well, I will have to listen in because that's something I struggle with. I'm a resident Marvel freak, and so I'm only tuned into the mainstream, but I am needing to branch out.
I used to be a Marvel freak myself. And as we might talk about later in this podcast, I no longer am.
Oh no! Well, that's understandable. We've kind of reached. I think Marvel reached its peak fairly recently. Not recent. It's a strange subject. If you ask me,
it did reach it.
But
hey, WandaVision rocks. So that's a different.
I think WandaVision is fantastic. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. WandaVision is for another time because today we are focusing on a very heavily, at least with this group, I believe, a very heavily anticipated film that dropped on Netflix last Friday, Sam Levinson's Malcom and Marie.
Yeah.
What do we have to say about this just to kind of start us out?
Well, I think maybe before we get into what we think of the film, I think that we should just clarify where we're coming from going into this movie, as in what is our background with the director, the esteemed visionary director, Sam Levinson.
Addie, take this one.
Visionary director Sam Levinson is quoted in advertisements for the film, so we have to refer to him as such, of course. Up until about a week ago, I believe me and Levy were on record saying Sam Levinson is our god.
Love you called me Levy. Like a mix between me and Sam Levinson. It's fine. I love it.
He made one of our favorite shows of all time, made 2 of the greatest episodes of TV we've seen maybe ever in the 2-episode specials we covered on the show.
Yes.
I haven't seen any of his previous films. I think, Livy, you've seen one of them.
Have I now? Well, that's news to me.
Have you seen Assassination Nation?
I have not, no.
Okay, I just figured that was up your alley. So we know for Euphoria, our god, greatest show ever. Not anymore. Well,
okay. Now hold your horses. Addie does not speak for me when they say that. I still very much appreciate his work. I think that maybe Malcom and Marie has not been his best work. I'm sorry, I don't want to dip into what we thought of the film yet, but this was not enough to kind of dash the Sam Levinson appreciation that I have. It definitely was different than what I anticipated, but I think that I am definitely more of the moderate person, the moderate voice in this podcast episode, where you both are a little more on the negative side, and that's fine because we're not supposed to love everything. That's kind of the point of life. Not really.
Okay, so you both are just huge Euphoria fans then.
Yes. I just finished my rewatch of it, my 3rd one last night, and
okay. Yeah. So I watched the pilot for Euphoria back when it came out. And it wasn't for me. It was very, super intense, lots of trauma stuff, and I was just like, I think I can back off from this for the time being. And I never really came back to it just for whatever reason. There's always other stuff to watch. Yeah. But then when this movie came out, I was like, oh, Malcolm and Marie. It's got John David Washington. It's got Zendaya. It's black and white. This looks very interesting. Who directed this? And I was wondering, and then it turns like, oh, it's a white guy. That's odd. What else has he directed? Oh, he directed Assassination Nation from 2018. That was a film that I was interested in watching until I found out that it wasn't directed by a woman. And so I came into Malcolm and Marie by doing this. I watched Assassination Nation the day before I watched Malcolm and Marie, just so I could get some context onto this film. And I think it's relevant because Assassination Nation is indirectly discussed in Malcolm and Marie.
Can you explain?
So what B's referencing is there's sort of jumping ahead a little bit. In Malcolm and Marie, there is a section where Malcolm, played by John David Washington, is getting reviews for his film that was just released, and he is lambasting the criticism of his current film of the same criticism that Levinson got with Assassination Nation. And using Malcolm as basically like a like a puppet or a face, basically, to lambast this critic for the words that she said for his previous film.
That is, because that's interesting. In my notes here, I definitely wrote down Sam speaking through Malcolm, question mark, question mark, question mark.
More like exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
Well, you know, I've told this to Addie multiple times when we record, that my first view of films, I'm an English major. I am an aspiring journalist, writer, which in my notes also said, this movie is making me scared of chasing my dream of being a film journalist, and that still stands. But for some reason, when I watch movies and films for the first time, I'm always focused on scenery and lighting and directing. You know, like I'm never focused in on what is being said by the characters until maybe my second watch. Sometimes that's not true, and it's a very dialogue heavy film. Then I will be focused more on what they are saying. But in this one, I mean, you said it perfectly yourself. This is in black and white. This is interesting. This is filmed in a way that kind of had me focusing on what was happening around the characters as opposed to the characters themselves. But no, I mean, I found it. I'm glad that we are on the same page with this whole, like, okay, this is definitely, Sam got a bad review once, and now he got a little angry and made Malcolm and Marie.
So we're jumping past the start point, basically. So for those who don't know, Malcolm and Marie is from the visionary director Sam Levinson, who you would know from Euphoria, starring Zendaya and John David Washington. Right. It basically chronicles a director and his ingenue, his muse, his partner, the night after the big screening of his film. And everything sort of spirals from there. Yeah.
Quickly too.
Yeah. The entire film takes place in a house. The entire film consists of their arguments.
Yeah. A lot of mac and cheese. Lots of mac and cheese.
God, it made me so hungry. God, I was starving.
Can we talk about the mac and cheese? Let's talk about the mac and cheese, because the mac and cheese. All right. So I actually had to, because the mac and cheese bit, it's in the first maybe 7 minutes that most of the mac and cheese stuff happens, up until the title card that we get over the finished bowl of mac and cheese.
Delicious.
And I had to pause the movie and scream and go rant to my family about this, because they don't prepare it right. They don't prepare the mac and cheese right. They do it all wrong. She doesn't put in the milk. See that box of Kraft mac and cheese that is in that film, that I have a personal connection to that mac and cheese, because I make that mac and cheese all the time. And I'm a freaking intense connoisseur with my Kraft mac and cheese, because like, it was my comfort food during college. Like when I was in a super depressed, I'm glad that you went and got your Kraft mac and cheese. I've got some upstairs.
Hey, video people who we just started. This is my second unopened box I have in my apartment every day.
Hot. That's real hot.
Yeah, no, like
Costco's a godsend.
But like, I used to make Kraft mac and cheese when I was like super depressed. It was my comfort food, and I have it down to a science. It's a 30-minute process. She does it in an 8-minute thing without thinking. And then to top it all off, John David Washington stabs it with a fork like an animal.
No, use a spoon. You get more. Like, am I right?
Even if you are using a fork, which I don't judge people who eat mac and cheese with a fork, you don't stab it.
They're soft noodles. It goes straight to the bowl.
And you can hear it. It's just like, I don't know if it was intended for comedy. I don't know if it's intended to show, because like apparently John David Washington eats this a lot. Like Malcolm eats this a lot. No. So why is he so incompetent at doing it? Anyway,
he's pissed.
So we're circling around everything right now. So I want first thoughts, because I think we're getting at the little details, and there's a lot to nitpick here. So Livy, I want to know, like, overall, what are your thoughts in this movie?
Okay, well, and it's funny because I truly don't do this often with the films that we review. I know it sounds very unprofessional, but also I am a college student and I take notes on everything else. But this was one of the first movies that we watched for this show that I actually started taking notes on, but not because okay, well, it's 50% because I'm like kind of interested in getting a point. Like it's like that. Like I know we're gonna have a guest. I know I actually want to talk about this, but also 50% because I was so scared at the end that I wasn't gonna have anything to talk about because of how much it underwhelmed me. So like the one thing that I noticed from the beginning was not only is there a Assassination Nation nudge in there, but there's also a Euphoria little Easter egg. And Addie, I'm curious if you heard this too. So because I just rewatched Euphoria and I watched Rue's special Christmas episode, you get to know the names of her sponsor Ali's daughters, and those are Marie and Imani, which are also the names of Marie from Malcolm and Marie and Imani, the titular character of Malcolm's film. And that caught me immediately, and it didn't like amaze me and shock me, and you know, kind of it did for a second, but then I realized, Sam, like what's the point? Was Rue's episode all one big, commercial for your new film, or was this new film just so you could have that little nudge at Euphoria? And I was like, what? I'm feeling like there's a bit of like he has a bit of an ego with that one that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, we know you like your characters and you are really in love with everything that you do, but you know, maybe I truly do not know how to take it. I
mean, we can get into it later, but I think Levinson has a massive ego.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it because I still love this dude. I mean, I told you guys, like you guys are a little bit on the like, okay, Sam, we get it. But I'm like, I still like the work that he does to an extent. The other note I had was I already knew I loved smooth jazz, but this movie just made me love it more. And that was kind of one of the only things about this movie that really like got me was the soundtrack. And granted, Sam does a very good job with picking people to be in charge of the soundtracks of what he does. I know that Labyrinth did Euphoria. I don't remember if Labyrinth did this one as well, but I do appreciate the kind of work that he does with making sure that, the music matches what is happening. Yeah, I'm very, like I said in the beginning, I'm underwhelmed. I started watching this on Wednesday, maybe Thursday of this week, and I got busy, and basically the movie ended and I had not watched any of it. Like it couldn't keep my attention for that first like 10 to 15 minutes even. I think I got to the point where they started like making out on the bed. They stopped their initial fighting of why didn't you thank me, and started making out. And then I'm just kind of like, all right, well, I can't keep up with this because I'm working around the house. I'm going to need to actually put some effort into watching this, which I don't think is, in that sense, ever what you want from a film. You want to be naturally invested in it as opposed to forced to be invested in it. So that's my initial thought.
I would argue that like some films, like you do like need to earn that, and you have to like put the effort in to pay attention, because some films are just like made to be uncomfortable or hard to watch.
Yeah, right. No. And I completely agree, but I feel like not in this way. I don't want to be, I want to be confused and invested and have to earn the understanding or have to earn the like actually being the naturally investing in a film, as opposed to being so bored that you have to like look up from your phone every 10 minutes to remind yourself, hey, you have to do this for a podcast. You have to watch this movie.
We gave you a chore in a literal sense. Like it's like, I have to do this. It's gonna get me something. It's just like,
I started cleaning my house at my first watch because I was like, I guess I can do this at the same time. I'm being a lot more critical than I thought I would be. Because like I said, when I finished the movie, I was fairly like content.
Yeah.
It wasn't an overwhelming love, but it also wasn't an overwhelming hatred. So
maybe it's just our energy. You're feeding off of it. You're festering in us.
This happens. I should not have looked at your letterbox review.
So,
Addy, that's my fault.
I will. So the one thing I'll mention before, I think me and B are the same page. So I'll just let them take it. Is so, Labyrinth is the composer. Levinson also kept the cinematographer and the editor. So this is the Euphoria crew. The only difference is Levinson is now the singular writer rather than a writer's room, which we see what happens there. So B, take it away, because from what I understand, I think we're on the same page with pretty much everything here.
So Sam Levinson thought that he was you refer to him as he was your god. I think Sam Levinson thinks that he is a god because he clearly knows better than all filmmakers and all critics. You mentioned how he was a sole writer on this as opposed to Euphoria. He's also the sole writer on Assassination Nation, and you can tell because there is not a female voice in that movie. This movie is it's hard to call it a film because it feels more like Sam Levinson had his feelings hurt by a female critic and decided to make an entire film to be as cruel and vile and hateful as possible to her. And at the end of this credits, I took a picture of it because it says that there are any connections to real persons living or dead is purely fiction, not intended.
That's
BS.
So
Katie Walsh wrote a brilliant review of Assassination Nation, taking him to task for his male gaze BS that was all over that movie. And so what he did is he never mentions Katie in the film, and Katie has been the way bigger person by saying it's like I'm not the person in the movie, and she hasn't written a review of the film. She's staying out of the conversation. And Sam Levinson, of course, is like, of course I didn't mean her. But throughout the film, he calls the female, the white lady critic from the LA Times is referred to as Karen or Jennifer or various white woman names. And really, I mean, you say that there's a scene in the movie which refers to her. It's from the get-go. It's the entire movie is just verbally assaulting this critic. And I know that it's only an aspect of the film, and it's obviously the one that Sam Levinson is wanting to bait critics by. Is like, see, I insulted you. Now, are you going to dare come and criticize me for it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to criticize you for it because you don't understand what film criticism is. And you don't really understand what how education works in movies, because he's claiming, first of all, he's talking about film criticism as he's talking about all the white critics. And let's remind ourselves that this is John David Washington. This is a black man talking about white critics, right? And I saw a couple of fellow critics point this out, is like, does John David Washington, the black director, realize that there are such thing as critics of color, and then fellow critics who are of and who are not white? I am white, and at least I'm going to admit it, Sam, as opposed to you, who would like to very much believe that you have the voice of someone who isn't. That is like, are you going to admit our existence as well? And it's just, this is just an incredibly mean-spirited film that is so self-absorbed that it doesn't understand that it's not even a movie when you take away all the BS aspects of like film criticism and all stuff about if you take out all the stuff about filmmaking, you just make it about a film about a relationship, it's still not a great movie. Yeah, this is Malcolm and Marie is one of the, it could be a play. It's an argument film where it's just people yelling at each other for the entire film. And I mean, the default film when you think of this is the Elizabeth Taylor film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is an entire film about an argument between a married couple. And the difference in that film is that there's an actual argument in that movie, and people are going back and forth and yelling barbs at each other. This is a bunch of monologues just that go on forever and ever and ever. That's not how an argument works. That's not how people talk. That's how a film student writes. The whole thing's amateurish.
I think the thing to point out here is, and so for the first bit, I'm going to be aping the words of another critic who I think basically described my issues perfectly, from Robert Daniels of The Guardian. I recommend you read everything he wrote here because I think his review is perfect.
He did write a very good article.
Yeah. As Malcolm Marie unfurls, Levinson shifts Malcolm's voice from a black one to the white director's own. Suddenly, Malcolm isn't decrying white critics anymore. He's denouncing a white female critic, emphasis on female. If Malcolm were a white man, such as Levinson, a critique Levinson anticipates when he employs Malcolm to censor pundits who play into identity politics, he would possess far less leeway to flog a female journalist. But through the mouth of a black man like Malcolm, a character who carries the weight of systemic oppression, even if he arises from a well-to-do background, such lines of attack are fair game, even when they are in fact ambushes. Levinson purposefully manipulates a black voice to get his criticism through, and to me that's like, the film is blatantly offensive. It's Levinson coming from such a privileged background, and I didn't realize this beforehand. He's the son of Barry Levinson, which just blew my mind when I looked it up the first time. Yeah, it's him coming from his rich white background where everything is laid out for him, and he gets a little bit of criticism. It's Assassination Nation, but tweaked a little bit. It goes from trying to emulate a women's voice, whereas decrying them and harming them more by doing the same thing for black filmmakers and black artists and everything. He's trying to use them to manipulate his story and his message and to tell and say what he wants to say, and basically hiding behind this wall of, oh, if they're like, they can do it, I'm not the one saying it. Levinson made a horrendously offensive film here, in my opinion. And while everything else around it is fantastic, I think the sound, like, both actors are amazing. The sound editing, the cinematography, the score that you mentioned before, great. Everything that Sam Levinson did not get his grubby little fucking mitts over, amazing. Everything he did to contribute to this film actively undermines everything he did. And there is wonderful things to talk about here. Something that Levinson drops in there that he has no fucking place to talk about, and something I don't think we have a lot of space to talk about either, is whether all black art is political or not. And I think that's an actually interesting thing. But when you're trying to make an argument about that from you, who has no experience and you don't have a right to have an opinion in this field, giving it to John David Washington's character, that's horrible. I don't know who the fuck told him this was okay, and he just ran with it.
Yeah, no, there's a line in the movie where where Malcolm is complaining about how this white lady from the LA Times trashed his last movie because he was a man, but is now celebrating this new movie because he's black. And I'm like, wait, Sam, you're not black. You're
That's
white.
the entire problem.
You are again self-owning. You are just, it's the same problem again. You're operating from a space of, I have the objective viewpoint on this. No, you frickin' don't. You're being subjective, and you're forcing words down people's throats, and you're exploiting actors. I mean, you say that the cinematography is great. I would say that it's very nice looking. I would also say that it completely ogles Zendaya's character. And we can talk about the costume design, how Zendaya just happens to be in her underwear for like half of the movie, and John David Washington is clothed the entire time. Now you can say that, oh, well, that's just what the characters. It's a specific choice that Sam made to do this, and it's a specific choice of the cinematographer to frame Zendaya in such a way that the center of the frame is her torso and her pelvis as opposed to her face.
A lot of the movie she's also like objectified and used. Like she is an object in the film that is used to set up and occasionally be a counter, but not really, to Malcolm's arguments. She is there basically as a stand-in for something to happen about Malcolm, so it's not an hour and a half of him monologuing about bullshit.
See, what scares me the more that I'm thinking about it, the more you guys are talking about it, is kind of this hold that I now think that Sam has over Zendaya, because she's almost become his golden
muse.
his muse, his golden child, his euphoria baby that he's so like molded into. She's taking on these newer roles. She's coming from Disney Channel, breaking out into new stuff, which is like without a doubt much more adult. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue with that. And so, but what I think we see now is that I'm afraid almost that Zendaya may either is being manipulated by Levinson in some sense because of her allegiance to him in the weirdest way. Like, she's very much so taking on more and more like larger roles within the within the production of a lot of what Sam is doing. She's become a producer on Euphoria. She was a producer for this film. She, is I'm worried that there may be something deeper within their relationship than we are seeing. Learning about who this man kind of is, and his ego and his view of himself, I'm worried now about Zendaya, who I respect more than any person on this planet.
I think we're making Levinson out to basically be the next Max Landis. When I think a lot of this is just him again fundamentally not understanding filmmaking. And there's a reason that in Euphoria, even though he is like the head of it and he's like, look at me, this is my thing, he's not the only one. And
remember that Euphoria is not an original show. It's an adapted show. It was based off of another show. So we can't give all the credit to this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the show's success can honestly be attributed to the actors. Because yes, while we're there for the story, if the actors don't sell it, we move on, because then we don't really give a shit.
Very true.
The movie literally rests on Levinson, and that's the biggest fault of it.
And it rests on what Levinson. When I watch this film, I can't not think of Sam Levinson, director, creator, adapter of Euphoria, because you have things, and immediately as soon as they brought in the story of Malcolm's film, the point of his film, not the point, but the subject matter, I thought, okay, so you just made Euphoria again, but passively through another person. I'm like, is the first thing that I thought was, is the only thing that Sam Levinson knows how to write about drug abuse and getting clean and young Black women? Is that it? Is that all we know? Is that all he knows?
I want to say something about the exploitation of Zendaya. Okay. Because I would say that she gives a very, very, very good performance in this film. I think that if you want to criticize maybe about if you have a different take on maybe that her acting is actually hindering the film in some way, I would take that as valid, and I would say that it's weird because Zendaya she's a phenomenon. I mean, you would know. She is a phenomenon, and I'm just thinking. I went back over her filmography last night, and I haven't seen a bad performance from her. I also have yet to see her in something that I consider to be a very good film. Any success that Zendaya is having in Euphoria, which I can't really speak to, but from the pilot that I saw, she was very good in that. And any success that she is having here is not because of Sam Levinson. It is despite him. And I would say the same for the entire cast of Assassination Nation, his previous film, that the four female leads in that film, they're very good. It's just that they are exploited through the camera and through the editing and through the film, through the directing of these films, that they are exploited through that, and that any success that they have is not because Sam Levinson was gracious enough to give them a platform. It's because they were good enough to elevate his BS material.
I love that, actually, because that puts it into a whole new perspective for me. Yeah. Never saying, though, that I doubted Euphoria, Jesus. Zendaya's ability to perform It's funny though that I wasn't as enamored with her in this, I guess, as I am when I watch her in Euphoria or Spider-Man, because it is one of my favorite things. I would honestly take, you know, MJ or Rue over Marie any day. That's not to say that I think the one scene that in Malcolm and Marie that truly had me fixed and truly had me like, okay, I'm in now, let's do this, was the one scene where she is acting,
Is it
where
the knife?
she's like,
The knife scene. Yeah.
the knife scene. He's like, I haven't been clean, I stole from your mother. That was an awful, I did not do that scene justice in my stupid little thing there, but that was the one part of the film where I was like, holy shit, this is getting good. And then it was like, nope, never mind. And I'm like, fuck, I'm done. I'm out. I can't handle this anymore.
I mean, that does go to is like, yeah, good job, Zendaya. You freaking sold that.
Yeah.
But for most of the movie, she is a very passive person, just kind of laying around while this man child is yelling about a white film critic. And it's just, and a white woman is yelling about a female film critic, and how horrible, and how she doesn't even know who William Wyler is. Screw you, Sam Levinson.
I'm so much better than you. I know classic films. Like,
yeah, and don't worry, I'll throw in one female director just so that I look feminist.
My big concern is, like, I think through this we are beginning to recontextualize Sam Levinson. Like, I don't want to throw any names out there. I don't want to like sort of blur what I'm saying, but it reminds me of things I've gone before, where it's like I try to watch actors work after they've been canceled or been removed from mainstream media, and it's hard to look at that. And I'm just rewinding everything in Euphoria. And yes, that he has like created two of my favorite characters of all time. But seeing mainly his objectification of these people, how you see majority of just like a lot of naked women in these shows,
a lot of naked women, a lot of child pornography, which is something
was running theme. And like he's particularly
wait, hold on. Child pornography is a theme, because that's in Assassination Nation too.
No fucking way.
Yeah,
there's a whole subplot about it.
God.
Like main characters, Jules, trans character, amazing. We love her. Falls in love with a guy on a trans dating app, and then they meet, and he's like, you have all these illicit photos. I sent you ones that weren't even me. You're there like peddling child pornography. Date me, or I send you to the police. And that's like a big moment of the character. Like not to meant to be rooting for him at all, but just like that's a running theme within the show.
Not to mention Kat's character and her. Like,
Kat's also a child who is literally a porn star who is making thousands of dollars.
Which for some, I mean, I wasn't sheltered as a high schooler, but I definitely went to I'm from Oklahoma. I went to a religious high school. I'm not religious myself, but that was just what my parents wanted, of about 64 kids. And I didn't get invited to parties all that often, or ever for that matter. So I didn't know what went on. So when I watch Euphoria, for some reason, I'm thinking like, oh, this is just what happens. This is just what they do. And my friend Lulu, who I was watching this with, was like, there's a lot of child porn in this show. There's a lot of kids sleeping with like very old adults or older people. And I'm just like, yeah, but, and she's like, no, that's not normal. And I'm like, well, and she's like, neither are the drugs or the drinking. And I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, that's just kind of not how things work. And so, and I think we touched on that in our Euphoria episode, where we're kind of like, it is such an over exaggeration of high school life. Addie may have proved me wrong on that. I know you definitely went to a more.
I went to a worse school, but it was, I think like, yes, there's something to be said about like, yes, a lot of teenagers like traded nudes and naked photos and sexting and everything. And like what they show in the show isn't entirely out of the realm of coincidence, but it's, again, this idea of recontextualizing Levinson's work is seeing this and like actually challenging him as a filmmaker and as a person is, do these repetitive themes cause concern for us? And again,
you said that it was about young women being with like older guys.
Yeah, so and I was like, so
some of it.
The thing we need to keep an eye on, in my opinion, is Jules, because she is a young trans character whose identity, and like she mentions this in one of her earlier episodes, is she wants to conquer femininity and basically like make herself the most feminine version possible. and use it and do it through the man's eye. And
Right.
they did something against that, like about that recently. But it goes from like, hi, look, now that I'm a woman, I'm going to go on these apps and be fucked by men who are like in their 50s and constantly be this idea of desire, because that's what femininity is to me. And she is a character who is like most consistently objectified in there. This is going to make Euphoria season 2 difficult, because again, we are going to have to look at what Levinson's saying and what he's showing and saying, is this his voice, or is he trying to make authentic characters? Is this he thinks what reality is? Like, suddenly everything that he's done, we need to be wary of, more or less.
I would agree.
I mean, because we talk about maybe be wary of how Zendaya is being treated. I mean, you talked about, Assassination Nation, the main character is a teenage girl having a relationship with a guy in his 40s. And in this film, Malcolm and Marie, I mean, we can talk about, like, you know, what's the ethics of age differences in relationships and all that? What's the morals around that? And that's certainly up for debate. A critic I respect enormously, Rosa Parra, she's weighed in on the issue is like, I don't have an issue with it because of who my partner is, kind of thing. And I mean, we can talk about the age difference in this film, that Zendaya is how many years younger than John David Washington?
10 or 11,
kind
I
of
think.
thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, and the idea that like Zendaya is this muse who Malcolm is pulling his art from, and how Malcolm is also an avatar for Sam Levinson, who is pulling from Zendaya. Like, it's just, there's a lot of potentially beyond the incompetence of the film, of the screenplay of this film, beyond the incredible cruelness of what it's spouting. There's also just a lot in the take away the film, and you still have this kind of icky stuff that is within the what's going on. And I'm just wondering if it wasn't Zendaya, if it was some no-name person, would we be more concerned about what this film is saying and how it's treated? Because everyone loves Zendaya, and she's a very outspoken person, and she has a lot of agency in the industry. And what if she wasn't? What if she didn't have all that agency? How would she? I mean, she's a producer on the film, so is John David Washington. It's like, if she didn't have all this stature, would we be more concerned?
I'd have to say yes.
Yeah. I think our concern does just come from like the idea of like, is she his muse, and knowing that they have this career together and they've been working also in very intense environments together. I think at least the way I perceived it is, this movie, like, you can keep John David Washington, yes, but you can keep the whole cast, but no one would really give a shit about it if it weren't for the Oscars. Because at least in my circles, from what we've seen, even though me and Livy both love Levinson, we're going to watch this no matter what.
Yeah.
It's Zendaya is so good, she could win an Oscar. And it's been that momentum for however long since they announced they were going to tell us, like, I think it was back in like April or something.
Right.
And that emphasis on you have to watch this for Zendaya to become a real actress has built up this momentum and this story that everyone's like, oh, I have to watch it now. If that wasn't there, we would just see this and move on and wouldn't have challenged it. But now that so many voices are speaking out and saying, like, this is horrendous, we're having to challenge the film and challenging Levinson and all the creative people behind it. Just like, what would this be if the eyes weren't there?
Going and speaking a little more on the awards circuit and whatnot, I am starting to see, I believe she was just very recently given a nomination for a Critics' Choice Award for this. But I haven't seen anything else on or for Malcolm and Marie. I think that also this may be a very be like you were saying, she was good in this movie, not because of Sam, but because she is Zendaya and she knows what she's doing. I think that is also kind of a testament to how this award season with her is going to play out. Just because it's like, yeah, she's getting nominations for this already, but it's because she did a good job. There's reasons why maybe we're not seeing this film getting nominated itself. I could be completely wrong. I've only seen that because she retweeted it and said thanks. I don't follow the Malcom and Marie account, so
I'm an Oscars whore. I follow it like
love that
religiously. So like,
we
go by Gold Derby. She's currently the 6th for nomination, right behind Andrew Day for the United States versus Billie Holiday, which no one has really seen yet, so we don't know how to have an opinion about it. She's in the same camp as Amy Adams for Hillbilly Elegy, where it's like big director, big movie, gonna win an Oscar. No one liked it. In the trash. No one cares.
No one liked Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, yeah, people hated it. Although
I couldn't watch it. It's far too personal. I could not watch that shit.
It came out the same week as I'm trying to remember what came out at the same time, but
describe.
It might have been Mank, I think.
Was it? That may be right.
I don't remember.
No, it's okay.
That regardless, that movie is not good.
Okay, fair enough. Then good. I didn't want to see it anyway.
Bad filmmaking and bad messaging.
Damn.
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot about it. So just like wrap it up. We can get some scores. Maybe it's just like, like what are you both taking away from Malcom and Marie? Because I feel like we've really just like dug into it hard. I still gave it a 2.5 because I think a lot of its elements are good. Again, besides Levinson. So
there you go. Yeah. Personally, just to get mine out of the way, because I don't really have too much to say about it. What I thought about it, I kind of already said. Personally, I was not aware of all of the drama, I guess, behind Levinson and his hatred for white women giving him reviews. You're a white man yourself, Levinson, so get over it. But, especially bad reviews. But now that I see that and see very clearly that this film is just a big old fuck you to the person who gave one of his films a bad review, I'm looking at it with different eyes. But if I were to have rated it without doing this podcast when I finished it today, I would have given it maybe a 3-star situation, maybe like a 3 out of 5. I'd have to go on and agree with Addie now. I kind of am looking at more of the 2.5, just because I'm like kind of starting to question things now. Like, are you using Black voices and Black characters to speak your stories because you're scared of, getting, your shit rocked for being a whiny little boy, a little baby, because you can't handle a few bad film reviews, things along those lines.
I'd say that they were very good film reviews.
Right. Negative, sure, but correct. Yeah. So yeah, this has definitely changed my perspective on it, and rightfully so. I think it's a very pretty film. Funny enough, I enjoyed John David Washington.
Yeah.
I'm a mess when it comes to name. I apologize. Zendaya she only has one. But I appreciated his acting a little more than Zendaya's. I don't know what it was. I know, right? Addie is blown away. Cannot believe it. And it's, maybe it's just I don't know if I liked her as this. I don't know. It's not like there's a rating system for the characters, because there's only 2. One of them's going to be up a little higher than the other, and that's kind of it. But at the end of the day, I may watch it again if I want to take a nap and I need something like relaxing to like fall asleep to. But to be fair, I used to do that with Jackass as a kid, so it's not really a very high honor to be what I fall asleep to. Yeah, so my review is it was relaxing and I like jazz. The end.
To call this movie relaxing is maybe the greatest burn.
I mean,
that's how much it didn't affect you.
It really, no, honestly, I am very like, okay, that was a movie I watched. Time to go.
I think when it all started, we were to a lesser extent, or I guess we really went hard at it. This movie was like, oh yeah, this exists, it sucks, let's move on. Yeah. I gave it 2.5 because I think a lot of the elements that aren't Sam Levinson are fantastic, and I think they do deserve respect again, including Zendaya and John David Washington. And we circled around to it. I'm going to circle back to it really quick of just like, is it be offensive and like really scary? Probably. Did Levinson also just write a really boring and uninteresting film about 2 characters who one character who I don't really give a shit about, and the dialogue is not that engaging? Yes, you made a bad film, Sam. You fucked up. Move on. Make Euphoria better. Be a better person. You also made something horrendously offensive, and it scares me of you as a person. So we know you're watching this because apparently you're obsessed with reviews. Get fucked. Learn. Move on. And be a good person, because a lot of us are trying to be good people, and you can't just be rich and white and straight and get away with it.
Love that. Wow.
B, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I have a home theater system with I've got a projector, and I project it onto the wall, and I hadn't seen a movie in a while on it, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch this movie on the big screen. And so I did, and the film grain is like, yes, the production design is so nice. The cinematography, the use of contrast throughout this film is just, a lot of people, when they do black and white movies nowadays, look at something like Mank. They just put a black and white filter over the thing and they call it a day, and it just doesn't look good. This movie looks good. This movie is edited well. I think the pacing, I think it gets a bit repetitive, but overall it held my attention. I enjoyed looking at that screen. And then I remembered that I had to turn the sound on and listen to the BS that these characters were spouting, because John David Washington he's throwing his all into this man-child character, and Zendaya is giving by contrast, a very almost laid back, subtle performance that comes out in just quick, sharp spikes. And I think that they complement each other well. I think the acting is very good. I just think that it's so, the definition, I think the best way to describe this film is just immature, because if you made an entire film that had the purpose of being mean to being more than mean, being cruel and being more than cruel, being misogynistic towards critics, and being gatekeeping, and believing that you know the true nature of film criticism, and the true nature of filmmaking, and the true nature of how race works in movies. I'm going to take all of my words with the whole shaker of salt, but at least I'm going to acknowledge that I don't have the correct perspective on filmmaking and on film criticism. I think this is a mean-spirited, and more than that, it's incompetent. And I think that if you took some monologues out of this and you put them in like hey, here for film students or theater students, like here's some monologues that you can practice for scene work, like monologue workshopping. There's some interesting stuff in there, but as a movie, it doesn't work. And in terms of messaging, it's gross. And in terms of outside of the film and what does this mean for Sam Levinson and his relationship to his material and the relationship to his actors, I think it's exploitative. And so, yeah, if I see a movie that's worse than this in 2021, I think it'll have been, no matter how many great, brilliant films we see this year, it'll have been a sad year for cinema that produced something that was worse than this masturbatory piece of garbage.
Well, I mean, well said.
And it didn't even get the mac and cheese right. Screw you.
That's honestly where it went wrong for you.
They did call Remy a ratatouille, so there is somewhere down to go.
Did anyone else think that the dish of ratatouille was just a bunch of different colored pepperonis as a kid, or was that 100%. Just me?
Yeah. I've made it. It's actually pretty good.
Dang, I'm a 4-year-old. I don't eat vegetables because I'm built different. I don't know.
I probably should have suggested we watched the Ratatouille for the show.
Did
just
you?
So I'm not alone. Oh, I watched it. It's painful. It's rough.
Yeah, I don't trust anything that TikTok does, not even as an app or just in itself.
Speaking of TikTok, there is a great TikTok about Malcolm and Marie's neighbors that you should look up.
I saw that.
I love that.
And he's like, is he still there yelling about Barry Jenkins? But yeah, no, there's a great TikTok that you should definitely check. That is 5 million times better than this movie. The best part of Malcolm and Marie is Zendaya's monologue about his upcoming Lego Angela Davis biopic. I liked that bit. I thought that bit was pretty funny.
I'd see it. I don't know.
But anyway.
We're not doing Ratatouille, unfortunately, but next week we are keeping things light. It is the romance season, so we're gonna pick a movie that I think I've seen, Livy hasn't seen. Great romance people haven't seen much. It's called What If, starring Daniel Radcliffe and Zoe Kazan. That's her name. It also has Adam Driver screaming about nachos. It's a great time. Excited for Livy to watch. Excited to review it.
I'm very excited. I was scared. I thought next week was Cherry, and I'm like, it's only gonna go downhill from here. Not in terms of film quality, but in terms of mood. That is my most anticipated movie of the year, and yet I am terrified like a little baby to watch it. But no worries, we are waiting until March to do that. Thank God. But yes, oh my gosh, B, thank you so much for being here. This just was so much fun. I mean, I got to follow you on Twitter. Hey, plug your stuff. Like, let us know what you're up to.
Thank you very much for having me on here. I really wanted to vent on this movie, and you gave me the platform to do that, and I very much appreciate it. Yeah, in terms of plugging, I mean, I might as well start by plugging. I've written a bunch of articles for a site called moviebabble.com, and I'm mentioning that because I'm going to be writing an article on this film. I kind of use this as kind of like a test run for me organizing my thoughts. It's going to be, I'm going to frame the entire article around the mac and cheese aspect of this film.
Please do.
But yeah, I've got a bunch of, I was doing articles on there about Varda, and then I was like, wait a minute, I could just start a podcast about her. And so that resulted in the Screen's Margins, which is a podcast about, a podcast network with several series dedicated to filmmakers who I believe are underseen and underappreciated. We are on Twitter at Screens Margins. We're based on anchor.fm/Screens Margins. You can find us at patreon.com/Screens Margins, where if you subscribe at certain tiers, then you get several bonus podcasts about, we've got 2 free podcasts about new releases, which I do with Anna Campion, and about Frederick Wiseman, who may be one of the most important documentarians of all time that you've maybe never heard of. Wow. And then we also have a Patreon exclusive podcast on Lucrezia Martel, the queer Argentine director, Rainer Werner Fassbender, the queer German director, and Dorothy Arzner, the queer classic Hollywood director. And yeah, just a bunch of stuff. Vote on polls to determine what we review on our podcasts in terms of new releases. But yeah, a bunch of stuff. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and at Letterboxd at Blue Gray Closet. It's all film stuff. That's pretty much it for plugging. But yeah, thank you. I very much enjoyed this, and yeah, and maybe I enjoyed talking to you both, and I hope that it might be able to happen again in the future.
I have to agree. Oh my gosh. Well, that is it for Real Talk this week. If you have not seen Malcom and Marie, why are you listening to this podcast? If you would like, go check it out. It is on Netflix streaming now. Do what you will with the information that you just learned if you are hearing this before you watch the film, but take it with a grain of salt, because come up with your own opinions on things. That is all up to you.
That much. We didn't really talk about the ins
and outs. No, not at all.
Well, the mac and cheese is sort of fucked up.
We talked about mac and cheese, and we kind of said it was good. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Real Talk. Join us next week when we will be talking about What If. Addie, do you want to take us out?
Yes, thank you for watching Real Talk. Hope to see you next week, and if not, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.